No matter how diligent of a gamer you are, there are going to be loads of great games that you just don't have time to play, and loads of great musical moments that you won't ever get to experience firsthand. Today I want to present one of those musical moments to you that you have likely missed, the ending to Wario Land 3. Like a lot of Nintendo games, Wario Land 3 has a musical instrument mechanic that aids your progression through the game. Wario finds himself trapped inside a music box and must find 5 other music boxes to unseal the final boss, defeat him, and escape. Composer Kozue Ishikawa took the opportunity to create a musical payoff for those paying attention. Each music box has its own unique musical fragment, and when you gather the music boxes together, these fragments combine to create a full melody. This melody is then used as the credits theme of the game, celebrating your completing the game by turning the delicate music box melody into a triumphant musical victory lap. Each music box's melody works perfectly well as a congratulatory jingle for defeating whichever boss was guarding that particular music box, offering a short but satisfying melodic gesture that resolves sweetly at the end. They all play out in the key of A major. Let's go through them one by one. The first music box starts on the 3rd and walks up to the 5th with this quarter note to 2/8 note rhythm. Then it holds that 5th for a dotted quarter note and jumps down for a little step up to resolve back to the 3rd where we started. It's a totally nice, self-contained little jingle, right? A simple 1-5-1 A to E to A cadence. The way the lower voice fills in the space left by this held high note is a nice touch, too. The second music box takes that same quarter note to 2/8 note rhythm and sets it to a new figure, this time moving from a D chord to an A and ending on an implied E chord, 4 to 1 to 5. These 8th notes are the same in both halves of the bar, and our human pattern recognition software immediately separates these from the descending notes that appear on beats 1 and 3. So we expect the line to jump down to a D on the start of the next bar, but instead, these last 8th notes continue walking up to a high B, creating a triumphant feeling. With the 3rd music box, we start to see a clear rhythmic pattern emerge. We have the exact same rhythm that we saw with the first music box, and the end of the phrase is almost the same. We move down from one chord tone of E to another and then resolve up to a chord tone of A. But unlike the first music box, we get this big dramatic leap here. The melody jumping from the root to the 3rd to the root an octave above before settling on that G sharp to bring us to the 5 chord. Leaping up to the tonic note at the end, A, gives the jingle a nice sense of finality. The 4th music box changes things up a bit, running down a D major arpeggio and then walking up from F sharp to G sharp to resolve to our tonic A. The bottom voice breaks away from harmonizing the top line to give this nice walk down from E to D to C sharp at the end. The 5th music box is the odd one out, using a single note line instead of 2 voices harmonizing a melody, and it walks up a simple A arpeggio, moving to an E arpeggio, and then resolving to an A note to finish. On their own, each of these feels self-contained, a collection of perfectly nice little musical statements. But it turns out these statements are actually musical puzzle pieces that fit together into one complete melody. When Wario unites the 5 music boxes and we hear their combined theme, you'll immediately recognize some of the pieces. The melody is put together with a flawless structure. A 2-bar melodic idea that expresses the 1 chord, A, is played and then answered by a different 2-bar idea that ends on the 5 chord, E. The first idea is repeated with a variation, and then a new answering idea closes off the melody with a resolution from 5 to 1. Beethoven himself would look at this structure and say, "How is this noise coming out of that little box?" Look at how the music box jingles slot into this structure. The first music box theme is the first bar of melody, and the second bar is an extension of that idea. taking it and bumping it down a third. The second music box theme starts off the answering figure, and this time the descending pattern on beats 1 and 3 that we sorted out from the repeating 8th note moves is continued down from F sharp to E to a D. This D note gives us a huge leap up and winds around to end on a B, the second of the key, a perfect musical question to set up a follow-up answering phrase. This answering phrase starts with the same melody as the first phrase, but this time the third music box theme enters in on the second bar to give us a new variation on that original melody. This big leap seems to reference the large leap we saw in the fourth bar of this theme too, creating even more thematic consistency throughout the piece. And the fourth music box theme becomes the final 2 bars of the piece, bringing us from our 4 chord to our 5 chord and ending on the 1 in a perfect cadence. The fifth music box theme's 8th note arpeggios become the accompaniment figure that runs underneath the whole theme, outlining the chord progression in a simple and straightforward way. Pitched super high in range, with this classic structure and dainty accompaniment, the Game Boy sound chip really does sound like a music box. Now this is a cool moment by itself, but after you've defeated the final boss and the credits roll, the music box theme comes back in a really satisfying way. The credits theme starts with the end of the music box theme, played just as you remember it, but it's cut off at the last bar and instead jumps suddenly to this groovy, syncopated bass line. After the super high register music box part, dropping down to this chunky bass line hits so hard. And the way the voices layer up on top of it one by one is a great way to work within the limitations of the Game Boy and still create a build-up to the main melody of the piece. When the main melody comes in, it's our music box theme, but this time, rather than feeling dainty, the driving bass line and 16th note inner voice line make it feel joyous. We are floating above the busy accompaniment, being carried on the bass and inner voice's shoulders as we take our victory lap. I love the B section of the piece too. The bridge was added to stretch out the piece, and the way it weaves the same elements from our original 5 music box jingles into a totally new melody makes it a perfect counterpoint to the main music box theme. It's like the roles of each of the individual music box jingles are reversed from the A section melody. This time, the third music box line is used as the starting point for the melody, rather than a secondary variation. The interval structure is originally an octave leap filled in with a third, and then resolving down a step, played out in this specific music box rhythm. The B section melody starts with this octave leap figure, but filled in with a fourth rather than a third to better outline the new chord progression. D major 7 to E7 to C sharp minor to F sharp minor. This is the classic J-pop progression that always feels good no matter how many times you use it. The second bar of melody here takes the original first music box motif and shifts the notes around to outline an E major triad resolving to an A note, slotting in nicely to fit with the harmony. The figure starting on bar 3 takes the fourth music box melody, running down a D major arpeggio and then walking up to an A, but puts it over a 2-5-1 progression, making this D arpeggio an upper structure voicing of the underlying B minor 7 chord. Ending this figure on the fifth of the key is another way to keep the solid classical structure that the main music box theme had, feeling like a musical question that sets up the following phrase. The second phrase takes the third music box jingle that we started with here and transposes it to the parallel key of A minor. landing on the minor third and minor seventh rather than their major counterparts. This is accompanied by an abrupt jump to a 2-5-3-6 progression in C major, a distant key change to make all of a sudden, but using the same J-pop progression maintains a consistency across this key shift. This melody then winds its way to a B, a common tone between the two keys of A and C, which allows a smooth transition back to our home key and back to the A section melody by way of this extended 2-bar E7 chord. It's so hard to write a B section that fits into the A section without sounding too similar, but this theme nails that dynamic perfectly. As this last A section comes to a close, the music slows down to a lighter statement using Wario Land 3's main theme, playing out over trading 1 and 4 chords before a heroic flat 6, flat 7, 1 cadence brings us to the final phrase, a return to our music box theme. This time, the music box theme takes that second music box phrase and continues the pattern that we had originally expected, stepping down from F sharp to E to D with those 8th note G sharp to A figures in between. And then one last resolution to our tonic A brings us to the end, this A major 7 arpeggio giving us one last flourish before bringing our adventure to a very sweet conclusion. The main theme of the game is used in various forms all over the soundtrack, and so bringing it back at the end of the credits is a great emotional payoff. Even this last major 7 arpeggio figure references the several times major 7 arpeggio figures are used throughout the soundtrack, including being the very first thing you hear when you turn on the game. Bookending the game with the same musical figure is a great way to bring everything to a close, but it's not something anyone would necessarily notice on a normal playthrough. There's so much time spent in between getting each music box that you wouldn't necessarily remember all of the individual jingles, and so you might not even notice that they're all fitting together into the final music box theme. But that's what makes it so interesting when you find out how much thought was put into this stuff. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, or if you want access to my transcriptions of the game's soundtrack, please consider going over and supporting the channel on my Patreon page, just like patrons Zach Thacker and Dennis Antonov, whom I'd like to thank for suggesting this soundtrack's music box moments. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.